Hello guys, I was thinking this morning about triple equals and double equals in JavaScript, and I use triple equals all the time. It's just the way I do it. But I know people that you still use double equals. In fact, I see a lot of production level code out there that uses double equals, which is kind of a looser quality, and it doesn't bother me that much. It does require a bit of extra thought. When I see a double equals, the first thing I think of is this, is who is the coder? Are they good? Do they know what they're doing? And if they do, I'm fine with it. But part of me will always just rescan the code to make sure they're using the looser quality properly, just to make sure it's not a typo. Unlikely, but I always have that mental thought, and there's just a couple of mental steps I go through. I'd rather not have those mental thoughts. I would rather just use triple equals, but hey, I can't really control that. The problem, and the reason why I've created this little video, I'm going to show you some code in a second, is because I'm seeing a lot of tutorials and a lot of things online, generally about JavaScript, and I'm reading through it and I see double equals, and I'm like, this guy or girl does not know what they're doing, and they're doing it incorrectly, and they're showing these things on tutorials. And then what I'm seeing are more and more people using double equals all over the place, and this kind of truthiness, in if statements, if this variable is truthy. I just hate that stuff, and I would say unless you know what you're doing, and unless you're working with other people that know that you know what you're doing, then don't do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some code. I'm going to try and convince people. I'm going to try to convince people that are happy using their double equals to stop doing it and start using triple equals, and also to people that are new to JavaScript that don't understand what the hell I'm talking about to actually know what triple equals does in the first place and why I'm against using double equals. So let's just jump into the code and have a look at it, okay? Alright, so looking at some code here, what should equal itself? A good analogy that I think is pretty useful for this, if you had imagine you had a bottle of water and you showed that to a small child, and then you said, see this bottle of water, is this the same as a coffee cup? And you point at a coffee cup, and they're going to go no. And then you point at a bag and say, is this the same as a bag? And they go no. And then you point at another bottle of water, and you go, is this the same? And they're going to say yes. Now what do? Did you berate them and go, no, it's not the same, you can't have the same object in space-time, they're two different things, You don't start berating a child, you go, yeah, very good, yeah, that's the same thing. Another way of looking at it is if you go to a store and you see something for $5, and you then ask somebody, okay, how much is this? They go, oh, it's like $5, yeah? But then, oh, actually, it's $4.99. It's like, how just specific do you want to be? They're not the same, but you know what they mean. And the final analogy I was going to use was the time. If you ask someone, what time is it? They go, oh, it's 5. You'd pull them over, grab them by the wrist and say, no, actually, that's 5 o'clock and 36 seconds, actually. You were lying to me. No, you give them that, You don't really need to know. When do you need to know? I mean, when I do training, say I had training at 5 o'clock, and I say, what time is it? And they say, oh, it's 5. I would double check that because I start at exactly 5 o'clock, not 4:59, not 5:01. And sometimes I need to be very specific with the answers and to take things very literally. And when you're dealing with children, you're asking someone the time, you can be very loose. It really doesn't matter. But the challenge is when you start getting very specific. And I would say programming, you always need to be very specific. Because computers will do exactly what you tell them to. Another example is so will your friends. I remember I was over at Mount Charleston, I was recording a video with my friend Damien, and I panned over looking at the mountains, and I panned over my camera to him. I said, I'll say hello, Damien. You know what he said? Hello, Damien, right? So that's what my friends are like. And, who was at fault there? I mean, I know he was joking around, but really I wasn't specific enough. And he did exactly what I asked him to. And this is where I'm going to look at some code and use a similar example here. If you imagine something that is, say, $5, whoops, and you give that to computer can understand that. He goes, okay, $5 is $5, all good. And then you say, I want you to add, that's 1 cup of coffee, $5. And you say, let's add another cup of coffee. You know in your mind what that means. I mean, we work in sentences, and you're at cashier and you say, this coffee is $5, I'm going to have 2 of them, right? In your mind, you're going, $5 plus another $5 is $10, and you calculate that. How do you do that? Well, what you're doing in your mind is you're converting this string value into a number so that you can use arithmetic. And JavaScript needs to do the same thing, because guess what happens when you add this together? It's your facetious friend saying hello Damien, isn't it? It's doing exactly what you expect it to do, or what you told it to do. So you need to be a little more specific. You say, actually, I want you to use the number version of this. Now, I want you to take what I've got here and put this into an actual number. And you can't just do it one time, because if you do it one time, that's not going to work either. You're going to end up with, well, look, let me show you. This is going to say, that's not a valid number, that doesn't work. And then when it have a valid number in some sort of operand, the whole thing is going to be NaN, and it adds $5 to NaN here, which is, you know, not what you want. So there are different ways to parse numbers. What I would suggest you do, though, is you have something that you know will coerce correctly into a number, such as that. If you're not sure, and you have some sort of string in there, well, then you could use parse integer and other things in JavaScript. But again, I don't really like that very much. This is going to still give you the problem of 5, because what will happen is this will correctly parse into the number 5, which is looking like this. If I can give you the example of what they've done here, that's the same as this. This operand, just so you know how operands work, operators, these are the operands, operand, operator. When you have this, what it will do is it will look at this either side and say, is either of these a string? This one's a string, therefore we're doing a string result. And it will essentially put this back into a string 5. It will essentially do that. Okay, that's what's going on there. So what we should be doing is when we're dealing with numbers, we should be literally being very specific and saying, is 5 equal to 5? And of course it's true. But if you say, is 5 equal to the string 5? Well, it's like, no, of course not. But you know, if you look at the analogy of the bottle of water to a child, well, it kind of is. It's kind of the same thing. You know what I mean. And the phrase, you know what I mean, comes in a lot. You know what I'm trying to get at here. You know, if you take an input, if you say you had an input field and we took a value and we asked the kid's age and it said 5, yeah, that's going to come through as a string, because the input field value is always coming through as a string in your HTML and JavaScript. And so if you then say, well, if you know, have some code in your logic in your code that says if the child is 5, then we need to say, yeah, you know, they need to be 6 years old or something like that. If you had a conditional if statement in there doing this, it would never work. You would never be able to equate it. In fact, if you had an input here saying, give me the correct answer for the universe, and they go, oh, it's 42, and you're expecting that to equal the number 42, no matter what they type here, whether they get it wrong or right, it's always going to be wrong for them. And so you could say, oh, I know what you mean, you know, I know what you mean, I know you wanted to do this. Oops, would help if I didn't make a typo in there, and then that's fine. This is really what you should be doing. You should be taking your string and coercing it correctly into a number, and then comparing them properly with this triple equals. What I'm showing you here is a double equals which goes through this step for you. If I was to do 42 as a string is loosely equal, you know, kind of the same thing as 42, it says sure it is, because what it's doing is this. What you see here is what's going on here behind the scenes. In other words, this is a shorthand way to look at the operators, the operands, keep messing that up. It's going to look at the operands and it's going to figure out what it needs to do, and if it needs to do some coercion, it will. And once you've got them coerced, then it will evaluate with a triple equals behind the scene. So why is this even an issue? Why is it not okay to use double equals? And the answer is quite straightforward, really. If you know your own code, you might not need to. You might feel the need. You might not feel the need to go and use triple equals because you understand your own code. You know what's going on, and you say, look, if they're entering 5 as how old that kid is, yeah, he's 5. We know what that means. It's fine if you know your own code. But the problem is when you're working with other people that look at your code, when I would look at this, I would say, oh, does this guy know what he's doing? Is this a typo? And if it's not a typo, and it was specifically trying to be loosely equal, the first thing I would do is I would scan the code to make sure they haven't messed it up. You know, because it can be error prone. Which is just extra mental effort I don't want to go through. Is if I just see triple equals, I know exactly what it's doing and I don't have any problem with it at all. I would also think that when a new person's looking at this code, they're going to see this double equals and think that's how you equate things. And I think that's the worst. I think that's the big reason for doing this. Not that, you shouldn't tell a JavaScript who's been programming for years, hey, never use double equals. That's just going to annoy them because they've been using it forever and they know the way around their own code. But I'm just saying, for the prosperity of all the other people looking at JavaScript, if they start seeing double equals in your tutorials and when you're explaining your code, they're going to think that's how you equate things, and they're going to end up with all sorts of problems when they start looking, when they're going through the code and things aren't equating as you might think. Yeah, so that can cause you major problems. I would also just like to close on this. When you're dealing with, say, numbers, if you had a price is equal to 4, for example, I wouldn't write it like that. Because when I look at the variable price, I don't know if that's a number or an integer or a string. I have no idea. See, you have dynamically typed language JavaScript. You can have this as a string. You could set it to a number type. That's currently a string, as we can see here. Or later on, if you could say, actually, I'd prefer that to be a number. And I redeclared it there. And you can swap them around. I'll show you that again without the var. So I'm overwriting the existing variable that is a number 4 and making it a string 4 now. So Prince is now 4. Price is 4. I wouldn't write it like this. I think this is problematic. I would do something like this. I would say price in cents, integer. And the reason why I'm saying in cents and I'm not using floats, well, I hope you know the answer to that. If you don't, I guess we'll do another tutorial on the nightmare to do with floating point problems in JavaScript and dealing with currency and all that. Really, really gnarly stuff. Maybe we'll save that for another time. But here, this is what I'm doing, is I'm putting an integer in there. So that later on, if I was to actually take a string input from somewhere, I know I would set that variable to a string. And if I was equating them, if I was to look at these two, I automatically know, without even pressing enter at this point, I know they're not equal. Because in the same respect of if this was capitalized, meaning it's a constant, I wouldn't change it. I would never put a boolean in here. I would never put a string in there if I know it's designed to be an integer. So convention is saving me headache and mental effort here. Yes, there's a few extra keystrokes, but it's very clear what's going on. And if you want to evaluate those two, well, guess what you do? And that would give you the correct response. If you don't assign them, then obviously they're not going to be true, are they? Anyway, so just to recap, if you understand your own code and you're never working with anyone else and you're an island, fine, just use double equals. Good luck to you. But if you're working with others or anyone else is going to look at your code, they're either going to think it's a typo, you're going to give them extra mental effort to work looking through your own code, or worse, a newbie's going to look at this and go, oh, that's how you do, that's how you equate things in JavaScript. I'm going to use this all the time now. And then they end up in all sorts of problems with false positives everywhere. And if you look at a lot of websites like WTF JavaScript, you'll see all the weird stuff that you think JavaScript's doing, and you go, oh, isn't that weird how this value would equal this value? That's just weird and bizarre. Well, look at them. They're always using double equals because that coercion is going on. And if you look a little deeper in coercion, and we'll probably save this for another time, you'll find that a lot of the coercions actually make sense. A lot of these WTFs that I hear about in JavaScript aren't WTFs at all. Whenever they say, oh, look, isn't that weird? I'm like, no, it's not weird at all. What are you talking about? And that's because the more you look at it, the more you realize it isn't weird, and it is doing exactly what you expect. But you have to have a deeper understanding to realize that. From a shallow perspective, everything looks weird in JavaScript if using double equals. So, triple equals for the win. Hopefully that persuades a couple of you, even if you just persuade one person, I'll be happy, to stop using double equals at all times. Alright, take care guys, and see you next time.